Hello, everybody, and welcome to Bright Founders Talk at Temi. Temi is an international software development company that designs, builds, and delivers software for sustainable businesses and promising startups. Welcome to our podcast where we bring you the most inspiring stories of entrepreneurs and experts in the software development industry. Now, each week we interview successful leaders who share their unique journeys and valuable insights. I'm your host, Barry. Now, today we're lucky enough to have a remarkable guest joining us, David Murray-Hundley, entrepreneur and writer of The Startup Rules and 50 Ways for a Startup to Raise Investment Using ChatGPT. David, welcome to the podcast.
Morning. How is everyone? I know they can't hear me.
I speak on behalf of everyone that we're doing great, thank you. And how are you yourself doing?
Yeah, good. Yeah, you just caught me on the simulator this morning. Done a few races, a new season. So life is good. I'm enjoying my time off at the moment. So
perfect. It's nice to hear. Enjoy that time because I'm sure it won't last forever.
Nope.
So firstly, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to speak with us. We do appreciate it. And for those who don't know you, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your long list of achievements that you've had in your life?
As we were saying, it makes me feel old. So I'm known as the grumpy entrepreneur, and I can be quite grumpy sometimes. And that was by my wife, actually. In 2012, she gave me that nickname. Achievements-wise, I started in tech back in the 90s when people didn't even talk about startups. I did AI at university when people didn't even know what AI was. Very lucky to do some quite web firsts in the 90s with e-procurement. And then I was very fortunate to be the founding team of Commerce One when I was 24, 25 years old. We IPO'd for 22 billion on NASDAQ in the .com. What goes up must come down. So that business went chapter 11. A few years later, I went personally bankrupt as well. Ended up building my own businesses. And probably in the last 10, 11 years, I've been kind of doing actively investment, probably more than I've ever done in my life. I've also been chairman, non-exec of companies, and been very fortunate that some of the companies I've chaired. We've sold one recently, as last year, was eFundamentals, which we sold to Commerce IQ. And that was all very good and good for my shareholders. And I'm very fortunate. I get to do, for most of the time, what I want to do. And then this year, life got too busy, shall we say. And sometimes you have to know when to stop and take some real time out, not a few weeks. So I decided to take a year, spend more time with my children and my wife. And it's been a bit of a tough year family-wise, but we're on the other side of it. And I feel much better for it. I'm kind of getting bored now, which means I'm buying too many things, which is never good. And I've been writing books this year. And for a guy who got an E in English, not bad. But thank goodness for my wife for copywriting, etc. So that's what I do. So I work predominantly with, probably could say 85% startups and scale ups, and the rest is some more mature businesses. And it's great. It's good.
If you don't mind me saying, were you always destined for greatness?
I don't know if I was destined for greatness. Don't know if I've still got there, but I was always meant to be. I think there was a part of me at school. I almost got expelled at my private school, which is quite hard to do. As I discovered when I went to a state school, it's quite easy to do. I ran a legal tuck shop against the school. That got me almost suspended. And then I did pirate software. I think I was about 11 or 12. And I'd worked out I could finance all these games and then just copy them on cassettes and discs at school. That got me in a lot of trouble. Not helped that I used Volkswagen branded discs and cassettes. My dad was very senior at that company at the time, so probably not a smart move. I've always kind of had big visions of what I wanted to do. And it's not been plain sailing. No, I was sleeping rough at the age of 18. I lost my dad when I was 16. I went through a real bad phase, and got myself in a lot of trouble. And I think if you've slept in a bus shelter in December in Milton Keynes, you kind of suddenly go, it can't get much worse. So it makes you quite resilient, makes you fend for yourself, just in some ways selfish a little bit. I was probably definitely guilty of that in my 20s. And here I am now, and I feel very fortunate. Even though it's been a tough year for us as a family, I still feel extremely fortunate, I have to say.
Are you a success because of those hardships or despite them?
I think because of them, to be honest. I think life, I always picture this in my head. If my dad passed away literally overnight, I was just starting my sixth form induction, and I always imagine that he hadn't, he always pushed me hard, but I kind of feel like I'd have gone on this different life and maybe not as been as ballsy, not been as, I wasn't that confident at that time. And I think with, doing some, hanging around with some naughty people as well, kind of makes you look at the world slightly differently. I think I've been in cotton wool until that point. And then, it's all, I like to think that even negatives that happen in your life have some sort of positive impact. And, I'm pretty sure my dad would be pretty impressed. And, it's brought me on to have amazing friends that I've had for 30 years. Who, one of them I work with every day. And, so I kind of feel that stuff happens for a reason, and so I think it's had an absolute impact on what I've done in my life and the way I am about things.
You mentioned networking a little bit there with saying friends and people that you've relied on. Most people that I speak to say that networking is probably up there with one of the most important things that you can have. What's your thoughts?
So I hate it. Hate networking. Really hate it. But you have to kind of do it. And it's been interesting. I went AWOL this year, off the radar of a lot of things, and people were asking where I was, etc. And which is why I changed my LinkedIn so people stopped bugging me. But you have to network. As much as I hate it, I do think it's quite important. And we had an example this morning with my wife on an opportunity, and that was because we were networking at a Sunday afternoon at a barbecue, and so it's come from there. And I know the guy in the village and stuff like that. So I think you have to. But I just I think the UK especially got carried away with networking events probably just before lockdown. It was at the height of just you go to these things and think, does anybody actually do any work ever?
You seem to speak quite truthfully about it. You look like most entrepreneurs who try to have a facade of hiding behind or trying to change the way they think. You've always quite honest, aren't you? Is that the way you've always been?
Yeah, it doesn't always do me good. I can be too honest. It gets up some people's backs, but I don't really care. Yeah, I kind of review if I'm Marmite. Well, I quite like Marmite. So, but my view is if you're not honest, then there's too much BS. And generally, people like me can see straight through it. But also, I just don't want people, wanting to waste time and energy, or as I say, burn calories on me if they don't like my opinion. It is the way it is. I don't mean to offend anyone, and I certainly, that's not what I do in life, but I will say how it is, definitely.
So that not suffering fools gladly can be seen as quite a good thing, right? Because sometimes you've got to get through some of the grease to find out what the actual content of it is. What other skills do you have in particular think have been really beneficial for you in your history?
Experience. It's a boring thing for an old person to say, but it's true. Gosh, if in my 20s, if I had the knowledge I have now, and I had that in my 20s, man, I would have smashed it. But no, knowledge, the experience side is very important. I can sit with most businesses at startup, scale up stage, and I can pretty much predict when it's going to go bad, the challenges, when it's going to go good. I can even predict when they're going to get bought out. So, and if that's going to happen, and I can, even fundamentals I pretty much timed. I've just done it on another one. I've gone, I reckon it's 3 months, or it's going to be 4 years. It's going to be very soon, or it'll take some time. So I think that's very good. And it's deja vu a lot of the time. I love startups. They all think they're inventing the only thing on the planet and they're an individual. And I'm like, no, you're all the same. So it doesn't, so there's that as well. I think also because I'm quite passionate about what I do, which is important. I've never done things because of the money side. I've done it because I want to do it. And whether that's an investment side or whether that's being a non-exec or a chairman or whatever, I think it's important you're going to burn time on it. You need to kind of really want to do it because it's going to annoy you at some point, right? And that's, they're the moments of testing. So I think there's that. I've been very fortunate to have been around some amazing people in the last 30 years. So that has brought not only experience, but just seeing is believing. And, not just on some tech media magazine, like actually I've seen geniuses at work, and some of those are my friends and some I've come across, and just that for me is just amazing. But I can't pinpoint one particular skill, but I think and probably the honesty is good as well, and I kind of get it. I don't know how. I can't actually say what that skill is, but I'm pretty good at seeing good companies. It's a weird one.
It's like a sixth sense kind of, right?
It's a gut feeling. People should go with their gut more. I wish I'd done it previous times. I've gone on my gut. It's your brain going, yep, You know it's true, but you don't want to believe it. And I think, yeah, there's a sixth sense. You get it with founders, you get it with businesses, you get it with teams. You just get to know.
It's good advice. I like it. And you mentioned reading the market there. Is that something that you've always been able to do, or is it something that you were taught or learned through your experiences?
Experience, I think. Yeah, experience, listening to other people's experience, and just been building on that. And I'm very careful as well what I read. There's a lot of bad information out there. There's a lot of scaremongering with in the world I work in, but there's a lot of I'm a real numbers person. So, whenever someone sends me a deck, I don't care what the deck looks like and all the rest of it. All I care about is the people involved, how much they've risked, and what the numbers look like. And I don't want the BS numbers. I want the numbers and reality. So for me, I'm quite a numbers person, which is astonishing because I hated maths at school. So I don't know how that's happened either.
I think maybe a lot of us have been there.
Maybe aliens took me and just transferred me into something else. No.
They could take me, that'd be perfect. I want the same skills. So reading the market and predicting the future, what do you see ahead of us? Do you see plain sailing or do you see tough times?
It's a really good question because I get, people get asked every year. I thought things were going to be rougher than they've been. So it's certainly, if I look at the startup scale-up world, it's definitely hard out there to raise money than it was a couple of years ago, without a doubt. There's been a lot of failures. There was all those companies that we all knew were going to run out of runway, and they based business plans on raising money, which is not success, right? Like, build a business plan that makes sales and keep costs down. So I thought it was going to be rougher than it's been. I thought it was going to be a bit more public than it's been. Certainly I've been through the dot-com bubble bursting, and it was like, you were a superstar one moment, and then people were spitting on you because you were from the tech world and you're taking their money. So I do wonder if we've still got it to come. It gives me such sense of nerves, really. I thought it was going to have been tough by now. There's a lot of it happens all the time. There's a lot of good businesses out there that are good, solid businesses, but kind of get missed because they're not all hype, they're not all excited, and they're not doing something in AI or whatever. They're just actually making money. I mean, imagine that, right? So, so I still sense that we've got some challenges, and and I look at the UK as a market, as an economy, just as someone who lives here, and I go, oh, I still think we've not had the down bit yet, and I hear about interest rates are going to drop again by next summer. I'm just like, we've got an election coming up. Not convinced. So it feels, I definitely feel nervy about how quick things can go good and bad, actually, in the economy and in generally in the space that I work in, whereas I think it used to be a more progressive, so probably easy to predict. But they're definitely, I still feel nervy. And, I'm looking at a lot of businesses at the moment that are kind of on the quiet. I'm not spending as much time as usual. And it's, there's some bad signals out there. They're really struggling. So, I think the fallout might still be there to happen a bit more.
Is it old age or experience that tends to make you more cynical? I say this from my perspective rather than you.
Definitely grumpy. Definitely getting grumpier of old age. Yeah, I think it is a cynical thing. I always love. I was saying to someone the other day about my two young children that I love the fact that the world hasn't affected them yet, and we all remember that, right? We all remember that moment when it hadn't affected us, and even when we were in our teens and we kind of left school, we were still like, yeah, everything's wonderful and great, and it is. And I think it's because I've seen this year, for example, is a lot of good, decent people on businesses getting screwed over, which is really sad to see. And it's been pretty bad this year. And it's not only been me. I've spoke to other people and they've said it's been quite obvious. That's disappointing. And you kind of wish where all the good people are. But yeah, I think it does make you a bit more cynical. And, it's there used to be a sketch in the 90s with these two old, I think they called them the two old gits of Harry Enfield, like, yeah, right? That's kind of how I feel I'm heading that way. We sound a park bench one day.
I think we're all heading in that direction. Some of us are getting there quicker than others, though. You've also mentioned a bit earlier, like all the hardships and everything that you've had. Does that make you really pragmatic? Does it make you realistic about the world?
It's really weird. So this time, December, when I was 18, I remember never thinking I was ever going to be sleeping in a stone bus shelter, right, next door to a building that I'd pretty much grown up in. I think it does. It makes you want to dream harder, dream bigger, okay, and it can't get much bigger than that. But I think there's a reality check, and this year, you know, I've been a friend runs a homeless charity shelter and apartments in Oxford. And I like to think I'm quite in touch with the world. And then I went to visit it, and these people are users, right? They're allowed to use in their room. And I walked in, and I was stood in the main reception area with my friend, and I just went, wow, oh my God, you think you're having a bad day? Because some of these people are having really bad days and weeks. And it made me get realistic about the world again and actually what's important. And I think that's an age thing, and with family and stuff, you change what your priorities are. You know, my priorities in my 20s was materialistic and ego. Now it's about my friends being okay, my family being okay, thankful that I'm here. And I think, you know, it's a weird one. You go through different points of it, but I definitely feel I am quite realistic about the world, and I'm realistic about businesses, and go, yeah, the reality is you're probably going to do this. If that makes sense. But it's good that people still dream big. Yeah, I think. Oh, sorry, my dog's barking in the background. So it's the Amazon delivery guy. Comes here 10 times a day.
Yeah. That's fine. It's really insightful information that you've given there. And you mentioned like that transition from the success of being 24 years old and having what everyone would probably describe as like the life of Riley, yeah?
Yeah.
And then it collapsed. Were you a victim of your own success?
Oh, God, yeah, and ego.
And ego.
Were completely my fault. Like, people go, oh, no, it was this, that, and the other. No, it wasn't. It's your fault, right? Take responsibility. When I went personally bankrupt, you know, I remember very clearly sitting with the judge. I didn't even turn up with a lawyer. That's how confident I was. And I remember the lawyer, they turned up, 3 lawyers turned up on the other side, right? I mean, what the hell? And I remember this judge saying to me, David, it's like a mallet trying to crush a nut, with the amount of lawyers that turned up. He was really brutal with them. And he said, David, I have to follow law. You're going to do all right, aren't you, in the next thing you do? And it was a real reality check. It was almost like being back in the bus shelter sort of thing. And I just turned 30, I think, at the time. And I'd had a crazy life. You know, I honestly believed it was going to keep going up. And then when you're 24, 25 and someone gives you all that personal wealth, I had a lot of people who were giving me advice that was pretty poor, actually. And I do think that's something we should try and do more with, especially younger founders. You know, and I went, if you actually look at the timeline, you know, 18 in a bus shelter, 21 was living in New York across from the World Trade Center with Chase and Intellisys, you know, 24 living in Silicon Valley and Monaco, you know, and you know, that in 6 years pretty much I'd got to that point. So I think, you know, and I was buying a Ferrari because I was bored and stuff like that. So I think there's, you know, and I did get carried away, and it was, you know, I had a great time. I say that, you know, and I think people thought I was doing drugs now. I've never done drugs in my life, and I certainly wasn't then. My drug was success, cars, partying, and just pushing the barriers. That's my drug, right? So, yeah, I loved it. But yeah, I was definitely responsible for what happened. And it was a good thing, because I think I may have inadvertently killed myself by getting carried away with life, actually. I was heading towards it a few times, and I think that would have definitely have happened.
So I think you kind of answered my next question, but just to clarify, would you do it all again if you had to learn the same lessons, or would you do things differently?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I'd hope I could take something.
Take some of the extremity out.
Do you know what? I should have known my wife. My wife wouldn't have liked me in my 20s. We wouldn't have met, right? But my wife said to me, if I'd known you then and we'd been together, you wouldn't have lost it all.
That's quite a condemnation, isn't it, really?
Yeah. But no, I'd do it all again. Yeah, 100%.
We've talked about all the successes that you've had. What started you with the writing? Because I mentioned to you at the start of the session, should I refer to you as an author? And you were like, no, I don't really want to be called an author. So what started the writing? And
I've always wanted to do stuff. And there's another book I'm releasing, which actually started in 2008 around AI, and it's actually called Will Computers Ever Love? It's taken me since 2008, and I'm almost done with it. But the other stuff was, I was writing a lot of blogs and bits and pieces, Are we allowed to say blog still? Or is that like 2010?
I'm old enough to say most things, so for me it won't make any difference. But maybe for the younger people, they might not notice it.
When I put my brain into something and I have the space to do it, I just get on with it. And I've literally just got on with it. And the startup rules, and I didn't want to make money from them. I wanted it to be that I was giving something back. And the startup rules, which came out in October, we've done 30,000 copies. I'm like, wow, I thought we'd do
Congratulations.
3. I'm honest. So, and it's had a lot of input from it. I have a lot of emails from it. And when I'm back kind of next year, I'll definitely spend a bit more time. But it's interesting. It's been quite unexpected. And I've enjoyed it, actually. And I'm also writing another one about my crazy times in my 20s, actually for my daughters more than anything, so they have a record of Daddy's World. And I had to tone it down a little bit, but which is going to be called a book to my daughters. And it's really for their benefit. And I'm kind of almost done with that. But yeah, I think there's so many more tools around as well. Like my wife always says this to me when she comes to read my stuff, that I write like I'm talking, if that makes sense.
I can imagine, yeah.
Yeah, which is not very good for a book. So, and you get, the voice memo stuff these days is great. I can literally sit and just go blah 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 blah, and it's brilliant. I think that's why I don't like to be called an author, because I always think an author is someone who just spends countless hours and days and months, and that's what they do, and they're amazing at it. And I'm definitely not amazing at it. So that was why when you said it, I was a bit like, ooh.
Oh, there's some humility. You're not living up to your name now, David. You're kind of like butting the back. You're being very humble and modest here. What is it about writing that you feel like? Is it something that you enjoy? Is it a hobby, or is it really just because you just want to share your knowledge with other people?
It's more I want to share my knowledge, and it's really weird. Like, I could do tons of YouTube things on it, but I feel like we don't read enough anyway. And I feel like quick reference, it's lovely to have a quick reference guide, right? Which is the way I kind of tend to do stuff. And my attention span is appalling. So the best book I ever read was Screw It, Let's Do It by Richard Branson, because I managed to read it from Oxford to Southampton on a train ride. Yeah, that for me is great. So my books aren't massive. They're, I deliberately, because I feel like some people just extend it for the sake of extending it. And I'm like, no, just get to the point. And so that's what I've been trying to do, is get to the point and be useful as well. So not just give problems, but like solutions as well, which is what I do in my work life. Like, there's always a solution to everything. Even the worst possible scenario, there's always a solution to it.
Have you ever had any moments where you've doubted your own expertise, or you've doubted your own gut feeling?
Yeah, absolutely. 100 times a day. Yeah, I had, to be honest, this year has been a tough year. So I'm honest guy. So, my wife was at the beginning of the year not great, and she had some challenges, and then I lost my mum last year. And I remember having a moment this time last year, actually this week last year, and going, I'm done with it all. I need to get out. And it wasn't so much doubting my ability, it was more just doubting why I was doing what I was doing. And then this year I tried to kind of keep my finger in a few things, and I was just going like, nah, this is not working. But that's more a mental health thing. I've been in a pretty dark place at one point this year, and happy I'm out of it, but it tells you it all takes its toll, and you can't get rid of that stuff like that. You've got to spend time on it. And I've watched friends in the same position, and with far worse problems than me. Yeah, I have doubted myself. It's interesting, like we talk about the race simulator, and part of the reason I do it is when I had a real dark moment this year, I went to Silverstone with a friend of mine, and I'm lucky to be friends with a gentleman called David Brabham. And if anyone doesn't know, David won Le Mans 3 times, was an F1 driver, Sir Jack Brabham's son, hypercar, etc. And he had a simulator for the kidney research charity. And I jumped on the simulator. It was you driving the Brabham BT62 around Silverstone. And I'd had 8 pints of beer because I was with my friend Kevin Doyle. And at one point, I actually had a pint of beer by the side of the simulator as I was racing. Anyway, I got third on the board, right? And they put in brackets 8 pints. Not great for a kidney charity.
Is that despite the 8 pints or because of the 8 pints?
I think I was quicker because of the 8 pints. Anyway, I felt really happy. And one of the reasons I run a lot is it makes me really happy. I switch off, and my brain doesn't switch off. I struggle to sleep at night because I'm constantly on it. And I went to my wife and said, God, I felt amazing on the simulator. It felt great to drive again quickly and do it properly. And she's like, right, get one. And that was what I did. And it was a new challenge for me as well. So I've doubted, right? I mean, I had a race this morning on a new track and I just went straight into it. And, you're doubted and it just pushes you more. And I'm finding I want to learn stuff. And I'm racing in Daytona race this weekend with IMSA, right? I managed to qualify through as a novice. And so stuff like that is another new challenge for me. And it's really helped my mindset, but it's made me come back. And I'm like, I'm probably going to be back on things in January. I thought it was going to be longer, but I think it's going to be January. And I am like, I said to my mate last night, DMH is back. He's back. It's good.
Congratulations on your qualification, by the way.
Thank you.
And it's nice to hear. And thank you for being open and honest about your hardships and the experiences you've had, because there's always stigma out there, isn't it? It's nice to hear people be open, honest.
Yeah, and I think there still is a lot of stigma. And I think startups and boards and shareholders need to take it far more seriously. Yeah, because when it's bad, right? And, I've had challenges before, but this year there was one point in July was really bad. And I'm happy to admit that because I'm on the other side of it. And I was actually writing something the other day that I might put out before Christmas, which is, if you're feeling this way, just get help, even if you think you don't need help. And I'm lucky it was actually my wife who kicked in and got me sorted out. But yeah, it is hard. And I watched a friend at the weekend who's really going through it at the moment, and the business has got issues and whatever. And, you just want to give that person a hug, right? But it's also, you got to help them. So, it is a thing that we all talk about, like we're all mentally we're aware of it. But then a lot of people don't actually do much to help it. So I think companies need to get far better. And I think people need to be aware that it's real lives that you're messing around with, and that some people, when they're vulnerable, giving them another little poke in the back is probably not smart.
Yeah. As people can see probably with the Christmas tree in the background, that Christmas can actually make these situations worse. It's always a very difficult time for mental health.
I was watching something, sorry to go off tangent a bit, but I was watching something the other day and they were saying that loneliness. Do you watch that Go Fishing with Bob Mortimer and that?
I wish I could say yes, but maybe I will.
Okay, well, you've missed out. It's on Dave. Anyway, it's really good. And they did a Christmas one, and they had a guy saying that, being lonely is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
That puts things in perspective, doesn't it?
Doesn't it? And there's a lot. Christmas is a tough period, whether it's financially, people feel pressure, or they're on their own, and it is. Reminders. I know someone recently that just lost someone, and I'm like, oh my God, you've got to go through this day where everyone's like smiling their head off, and
I think as you get older, you don't really. When you're young, probably you can relate to this as well. But when you're young and you don't hear people dying, you don't have many problems in the world, everything seems fine. And then as you get older and older, and your friendship circle, you start to hear people like passing away and that, and it brings a different perspective to life. Would you agree with that?
100%. I did. It's weird. So many people I know this year that have been ill, and they're probably ranging between 40 to upwards, and it's quite an eye opener. You go, oh shit, like, gosh, that's real, right? And that some of it is not recoverable, and and I'll say this, but April this year I almost lost my wife, literally one weekend, and that's a bit of a gosh. Okay, so readjust, and that's when you realise that there's a lot of stuff that's far more important than silly companies and silly people messing around. But
it's definitely sending a different perspective, isn't it? Puts things right in place. So thank you again for sharing that with us. So before anyone thinks I have a fixation with death and mortality, let's switch it slightly back onto more positive, because I watched a video of you on YouTube, and I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you'd completed a 10-mile run and you were in the middle of a countryside and you were just talking about how great. And it kind of links into what you're saying about being in the right state of mind, because the physical exercise is actually really important, especially as you get older. Can you talk to us a little bit about your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I started running again just before my 40th birthday. And I remember going for a run and thinking, God, it's really hard now. I swear in my 20s I could just go for a run. And I was about to have my first child, Harriet. So I was kind of like, right, okay. And I never thought I'd get to 40. My dad died at 41, so I had a real issue with 40, and I kept it going. And you know, when interestingly this year when I wasn't feeling great, I stopped running. Like I didn't even want to do that sort of thing. But I've started running again recently because of the simulator and just because I enjoy it. And it is amazing what it does to you because it gives you some, you know, they say the brain creates lots of chemicals anyway, but I think it's really important. And I think it's also, you know, I think we live in a beautiful world, and I think not just sit in a gym and do exercise, like don't sit on a treadmill, go out in the countryside or a park and enjoy hear everything around you will be great for your mind. So I think it's really, really important. And you know, I'm not perfect, you know, I probably go out and still party too much and do various other things, but you know, it's a happiness in my world. And I would say I see a lot of people at my age who just stop. They don't do anything. As we all get older, we worry more about health things like blood pressure and stuff, which you can't see, right? And I think, you know, you need to do it. I think it's very good for the performance of a business. I think, you know, you'll generally find founders who are quite active, don't just work all the time, actually do other things with their mind. You tend to find they tend to be a bit more successful. And I think that's, again, you know, as we get older, we realise that a bit more. But I think it's also harder to do. And the video you're talking about is up near my friend's farm at the top of the hill. I know exactly the spot. And it's beautiful around there. I love running around there. So
yeah, I would run there too if I had an area like that to run around. Well, maybe I wouldn't really, but I'd like to anyway, at least if I deal with. And you read the room and you read my mind, because I was going to quickly question you on that and you know, work-life balance. So now you're taking some time off for yourself. You mentioned that briefly, but when you were working, was it really something that you did draw that line and say, actually, work stops here and then it's my time, or were you very malleable and you didn't?
It's really a weird one. So in my 20s, I used to party every night, but work every night, work every day. I was known as the Rockstar at Commerce One because I do 24-hour stints, 48-hour stints, flat out in the office, right? And that's the way my life's always been. And you kind of do it, you start changing the balance, you party less, etc. And what I found I was doing was I was trying to manage home life, which is really important, right? You know, spend time. I have an autistic daughter who we diagnosed a few years ago, and you know, she can be a challenge, man. I mean, she's gorgeous and beautiful and lovely, but she's also the worst parts of me. And reminds me of my mum. But I was trying to do everything, and then also look after the family and stuff that was going on, and then deal with other people's problems. And then my wife, again, you can tell she's my opposite and she's my rock. She said, everyone assumes you're all right. Everyone assumes David can deal with it. Everyone dumps their problems on you. You're constantly, every day I will have, what was happening was, and it's been like this for years, is, well, David will know. So I'm dealing with like working with 5-6 founders and they're like, well, David will know. And then I'd get other people going, well, but David will know. And he'll deal with it for me, etc. And at some point you have to stop. You have to balance it. And so if I've learned anything this year, is sometimes the timeout, as I think I said earlier, has to be a proper timeout, but also it's made me go, that's not happening again. I'm not going to ruin my own health, affect my family as well by everyone else's stuff. And that's definitely going on. And I've had to be very, very tough because I am a natural helper. I like helping people. And so I've found even when I switched off that some friends were having challenges with their businesses and I was helping, but I was also having to step away because I'm going, I just can't sustain it myself at the moment. And I think the work-life balance, you know, we're lucky we have a lot more flexible working. It's nice to see companies aren't so 9 to 5 about everything. But, you know, we do still overload. And I think, you know, we're all human at the end of the day. And, you know, you can go for as many runs as you want, but it's gonna catch you up at some point. I think it is, definitely. So, yeah, I think people need to get that better. But yeah, I've certainly had some lessons learned out of it. Well, I won't be going back to that same routine.
Thank you for sharing that with us. It's really interesting what you said. Is it okay to say no to help?
Say no to help, being the one who's, yeah, I think so. Some people don't want help, right? But I get a lot, I find it's a real hard when someone says to me, David, I've got this real issue and I'm trying to deal with it. It's really hard to say no to that. It is hard. It really is. Because you put yourself out there as well, right? and you become known as the person who can fix most things. But sometimes you've just got to go. Ugh.
Is there a point where you're living up to other people's expectations and living their lives the way that they want you to live them instead of living your own life?
I don't know if it's so much that, but there's definitely another thing. God, Trina knows. Like my wife, Trina knows so much stuff. She said the other thing is they just assume you're available all the time, right? People just assume, and I think that's technology that's created that. I think people there's this. If anyone ever rings me in the car, my auto answer thing on my text message comes up saying I'm driving, and I've actually changed. Someone was laughing the other day because mine says, "Do you remember a time when we didn't have phones in cars? It was great."
Yeah, I can relate to you on that because I was thinking the same thing the other day. I think technology is a wonderful thing and it's brought a lot of innovation, but actually it's also brought a lot of stress into the world, like not being able to have your private space. Like my philosophy is that phone is for me, I'm not for my phone. But you see other people and their phone literally calls them and they go to it, and it's hard. I know it is hard, but I feel for younger people these days having to grow up like that. For you and I remember going to people's houses and knocking on the door to say, "Are you in?" That was how I did it.
Yeah.
But for younger people, they don't have that.
Yeah, there's definitely a lack of socialising, and I see it with certainly younger development teams and stuff like that, where they're sat across the desk and they're emailing each other because they've got headphones on. I'm like, just frigging talk to each other, right? And I see a lot of people who can just pick up the phone and go, right, got this question, and they're emailing backwards and forwards and that. And I see a lot of lack of the people. Someone joked to me the other day and said, how did you meet girls back in the day? And I'm like, well, you had to chat to them.
Imagine that.
Blown out, or you did well, and you lack confidence. Now you don't even do that. Do you know what I mean? It's like, wow, okay. And my daughter, she plays Roblox a lot and like Brookhaven and stuff. And her friends, that's how they hang out. I'm like, go on a bike, go to the park, go on the bike, go be naughty, do something.
Maybe go hack the Pentagon.
Hack the Pentagon, yeah, maybe. Or I used to do illegal when I was 13. I used to have a motorbike, and my mum used to think I used to take it down the same train yard every day. And what I was doing illegal road racing in a farmer's road with my mates.
But for those who don't know, that was one of the comments that I read, and I saw one of your speeches that you were giving to a classroom, and you mentioned that, and I was like, wow, now that is an ambition to have. Obviously, you were joking and you were young.
No, I really wanted to. That story was because my dad had a pirate version of War Games, which you could do back in the day, and my stepbrother had just got a ZX81 for Christmas, and I remember saying to my dad, I really want to hack the Pentagon. So he bought me a BBC Micro, and I wanted to figure out how to hack the Pentagon. Ended up writing a computer game, but it was, but still, yeah, I didn't realise the consequences.
But you always had lofty ambitions anyway, didn't you?
Yeah.
So that was the early stages then. So we are slightly coming towards the end of the interview, and in the spirit of helping other people, I do like to ask what advice you could give other people who maybe have some self-doubt, who want to be an entrepreneur, but who don't know whether they have the right qualifications, the right setup. What advice would you give to someone who is looking to set up an entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I don't think there's necessarily strict qualifications for it. I think it's okay to fail. Sometimes fail quickly, right? Don't spend too much time. Seek counsel. I always say to seek counsel, not opinions. Too many entrepreneurs go and speak to every man and their dog. I'm like, yeah, just seek counsel. You'll have non-believers. The UK is particularly bad for it, which is why I always love the US, because the US, it's kind of like go get, whereas here people like to push you down. So it might be even a where you live sort of thing. Do your research. Don't just come up with an idea. Do your research. If you ever reach out to people for investment, do your research. Don't send blanket emails to them because it's really annoying. And invest that time, because they'll invest time back in you. If you're doing something, don't make it so that people don't have to burn a lot of calories on what you're trying to achieve with a business or you as an entrepreneur. I think if you've got any self-doubt, it's okay to have self-doubt. Self-doubt actually can push you really hard sometimes as well, push you in the right direction. And write a journal. Have a journal. January 1st this year, get a nice leather-bound journal. Write down what you've achieved for the year. Write down what you want to achieve for the next year. Keep some notes and then refer back to it in a year's time. Always have it in a desk so you kind of remember why you're doing something as well. Value people's time, value your own time, but value other people's time as well. Don't assume there's this thing that it's all free and all the rest of it. And I always say to people, once you take investment, it's no longer your business. So if you don't need investment, don't need shareholders, crack on. Honestly, because shareholders are a pain.
Straight from the horse's mouth. This is gold, right? I'd definitely take your advice on writing down. I think it's coming up to Christmas now. New Year's upon us. I think writing down in my book what I'm going to do for next year and then looking back to see if I achieved it. I think making it real by writing it down is really good advice.
Yeah, we don't write enough down. I'm about to teach my daughter calligraphy, right? Because I used to do calligraphy. And I bought a fountain pen recently. And I love pens. I love watches, pens, cars, and shoes, right? And I bought a calligraphy pen. I hadn't written calligraphy for years. And I was like, wow, it's amazing, right? And my daughter saw it. And so we bought her one for Christmas. And I could see her going, wow, Daddy, like, people don't really write anything anymore. So I feel like it's a thing that gets missed. I really do. I feel like it makes your brain, certainly my brain, if I write something down, it's more in there than it is me visually seeing it or typing it out.
It's like for me, I could type words and get them spelled incorrectly, but when I write them, I do it differently. So I understand that connection. Yeah, there's a physical connection, isn't there? Perfect. Yeah. Do you know what, David? I could talk to you all day. I really could, but we are stuck for time. But I want to thank you again for the insight,
very well,
open and powerful conversations. It's great talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Merry Christmas, everyone.
So I must second that. Merry Christmas to everyone. David Murray-Hundley, writer of the Startup Rules and 50 Ways for a Startup to Raise Investment Using ChatGPT, amongst other achievements. Thank you again.